Imagine living in a world where strength isn't just a gift, it's a calling. A calling that will shape the destiny of a nation. Welcome, friends. Today, I'm going to take you on an incredible journey, an animation adventure that brings the story of Samson to life in a way you've never seen before. Picture this, a world filled with courage, challenges, and a young man who was destined to do extraordinary things. This is the story of Samson, a man chosen by God, even before he was born, to become a mighty warrior, a judge, and a hero in Israel. Long ago, the Israelites were living under the rule of the Philistines. Life wasn't easy. The Philistines were strong, powerful, and sometimes cruel. But even in times of difficulty, God had a plan. God always has a plan, friends, and the story of Samson shows us that nothing is too small or too impossible for God's power to act through someone willing to serve Him. Our story begins in the quiet town of Zorah, in the hill country of Judah. There lived a couple named Manoah and his wife. They were good, humble people, loved in their village, but there was one thing missing from their lives: they had no children. And in those days, having a child wasn't just a blessing, it was a sign of hope, a promise of the future. Every day, they prayed, asking God to bless them with a child, and they waited patiently, though their hearts were heavy with longing. One day, something extraordinary happened. An angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife. Imagine the scene, friends. She's going about her daily chores, and suddenly, a radiant figure stands before her, glowing with heavenly light. She was terrified, but the angel spoke gently, "Do not be afraid. God has heard your prayers. You will give birth to a son, and his life will be dedicated to the Lord from birth. He will be a Nazirite, set apart for God. No razor shall ever touch his head, for he will begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Can you imagine hearing that, friends? The angel was telling her that her child would not just be a son, he would be a hero, chosen for an extraordinary purpose. And think about this: Samson's life was already planned before he was even born. This is a powerful reminder that God knows our destiny before we even step into the world. Manoah's wife hurried to tell her husband, and Manoah, though amazed, prayed to God for guidance, asking for wisdom on how to raise this child. The angel returned to give them instructions, explaining exactly what they must do to honor God and prepare Samson for his life as a Nazirite. From birth, Samson was different. He was strong, even as a baby, and the signs of God's blessing were clear to everyone around him. As Samson grew, his extraordinary strength became evident. Imagine a young boy, full of life, running through the hills and fields, lifting things no ordinary child could lift. Even from a young age, Samson's life was a testament to God's power working through him. But strength alone doesn't make a hero, does it? Samson's life teaches us that God equips us with gifts for a purpose, and every challenge we face is part of a bigger story. Now, let's pause for a moment and picture Samson as a young man. He is curious, adventurous, and bold. But with all his strength, he also faces temptations and struggles. Friends, this is important. God gives us gifts, but He also teaches us responsibility. Samson's story reminds us that we must learn to channel our God-given abilities in the right direction, for the glory of God and the good of others. Even though Samson's childhood was filled with promise, the world around him was not easy. The Philistines were everywhere, and the Israelites were often oppressed. Samson's destiny was not just about personal strength, it was about leadership, courage, and faith in God. Every challenge, every obstacle, and every moment of temptation was preparing Samson for the mission God had set before him. In this animated adventure, we see Samson discovering the world around him, learning about right and wrong, and growing into the man he was meant to become. Friends, isn't it amazing to think that God can use someone so young and seemingly ordinary to do extraordinary things? Samson's story is a beautiful reminder that our own lives, no matter how small or uncertain they may seem, are filled with potential when we trust God's plan. As we watch young Samson interact with his family, play with his friends, and face small challenges in his village, we can already see the signs of his future greatness. His strength is remarkable, but his heart is being shaped by God's guidance and love. This is the beginning of a story that will take us through adventure, struggle, and triumph, a story that reminds us that God's power is real, and His plans are perfect, even when life seems difficult. So, friends, as we leave young Samson at the beginning of his journey, we see a boy full of promise, a child chosen by God, and a young man who will grow to do mighty deeds for his people. The angel's words echo through his life. He will begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. And though the road ahead is challenging, we know that with God's strength, Samson is ready to face whatever comes his way. And that, my friends, is just the beginning. Stay with me as we continue this incredible story in the next chapter, where Samson's adventures, challenges, and amazing feats begin to unfold. You won't want to miss it, because this is where the story truly comes alive, filled with action, faith, and the unstoppable power of God working through His chosen hero. Friends, welcome back. We've seen the beginning of Samson's incredible journey, the boy chosen by God, strong from birth, full of promise, and destined for a life that would change the course of history for Israel. But as amazing as beginnings are, every story has its twists, its challenges, and its ultimate triumph. Today, we dive into the second part of Samson's story, where his strength, his struggles, and his faith collide in ways that will leave you amazed. As Samson grew, his strength became legendary. People would talk about how no one could match him in power, and the Philistines, the rulers who oppressed Israel, began to notice. But strength alone is never enough. Samson faced temptations and choices that would test his heart, his faith, and his commitment to God. You see, God gives us gifts, but He also wants us to use them wisely. Samson's life is a powerful lesson in this, how God's plan unfolds, even when we stumble along the way. One of the most famous stories about Samson is his encounters with the Philistine people. Imagine this scene: a young man, surrounded by enemies, standing alone, yet filled with courage and faith. In one daring moment, Samson used his incredible strength to fight 100 men with just a jawbone of a donkey. Can you picture that? One man, chosen by God, standing against impossible odds and winning. Friends, this isn't just a story about physical strength, it's about trusting God to guide us through battles that seem far too big to handle. But as Samson's story shows, even heroes are not perfect. Samson made choices that led him into danger. One of the most important lessons of his life is that temptation can come in many forms. He fell in love with Delilah, a woman from the enemy camp, and she became a challenge to his faith. Sometimes, friends, we let our hearts lead us into situations that test our strength and our purpose. Samson's struggles remind us that no matter how strong we are, we need God's guidance every step of the way. Delilah wanted to know the secret of Samson's strength, and after much persuasion, Samson revealed it. His hair, uncut since birth, was the source of his Nazi right vow and his incredible power. Imagine the moment: the betrayal, the heartbreak, the danger. Delilah used this knowledge to help the Philistines capture him. Samson was defeated, blinded, and imprisoned. Friends, even the strongest of us can face moments of weakness. But what's amazing is that God's plan doesn't end when we fall. While Samson was in prison, blinded and humiliated, it might have seemed that his story was over. But in that moment, something incredible happened. Samson prayed to God, asking for strength one last time. This prayer wasn't just about physical power, it was a prayer of faith, a recognition that God's power, not his own, could change everything. And God answered. The Philistines had gathered in a grand temple to celebrate their victory over Samson, mocking Israel, and praising their gods. But Samson, now guided by God's Spirit, found his strength renewed. Imagine the scene: the great temple, the crowd, the excitement, and then Samson standing in the center, ready to fulfill his destiny. With all his might, he pushed against the pillars supporting the temple, and in a dramatic, earth-shaking moment, the entire building collapsed. Samson defeated more enemies in that one act than he had in his entire life. Friends, this was not just physical strength, it was the power of God working through a man who returned to faith. Samson's final victory reminds us that even when we stumble, even when we are captured by fear, temptation, or failure, God's plan is bigger than our mistakes. Samson's story is about redemption. It teaches us that no matter how far we stray, no matter how many times we fall, God can use us to do extraordinary things if we turn back to Him with a humble and faithful heart. Think about it. Samson's life had it all: strength, adventure, mistakes, and ultimately, triumph. He was a man who lived boldly, made choices, faced consequences, and returned to God's power in the end. For us today, friends, this story is not just history, it's a living lesson. It's a reminder that God gives each of us gifts and calls each of us to a purpose. And even when life feels hard, even when challenges seem too great, faith and trust in God can transform the impossible into the extraordinary. In this joyful animation, we see Samson's journey come alive: the thrilling battles, the struggles with temptation, the moments of weakness, and the final, breathtaking triumph. Animation allows us to feel the energy, the emotion, and the drama of Samson's life in a way that's both exciting and inspiring. Kids and adults alike can see not just the story of a hero, but the story of God's faithfulness, the power of prayer, and the importance of staying true to one's calling. Even as we celebrate Samson's victories, we remember that his story was never just about him. Every battle he fought, every challenge he faced, was part of God's bigger plan for Israel. He was a judge, a deliverer, and a symbol of God's strength at work through ordinary people. And here's the beauty of it: just like Samson, we too have moments when we can make a difference in the world, when we can shine God's light, and when we can accomplish things that seem impossible. As we reach the end of Samson's story, let's reflect on the lessons we can carry with us. First, God knows us and our purpose even before we are born. Second, He gives us gifts and abilities for a reason, but we must use them wisely. Third, even heroes make mistakes, but it's never too late to return to God and ask for strength and guidance. And finally, God's power can work through us in ways that can change our lives and the lives of those around us. Imagine telling a child, a friend, or even yourself that no matter what challenges you face, no matter how many mistakes you make, you can rise again with faith and courage. That's what Samson teaches us. His story is not just an action-packed tale, it's a story of hope, redemption, and the unstoppable power of God. And in animation, this story becomes vivid, joyful, and full of life, helping everyone see that God's plans are bigger than our fears and stronger than our struggles. So, as we close this chapter, let's celebrate Samson not just for his strength, but for his faith, his courage, and his heart. Let's remember that our own lives are filled with potential, adventure, and the chance to make a difference when we trust God's plan. Samson's journey shows us that no matter how impossible things may seem, God's power can turn weakness into strength, mistakes into lessons, and challenges into triumphs. Friends, thank you for joining me on this joyful animation adventure through the life of Samson. From the miraculous announcement of his birth to the thrilling battles and the incredible triumph at the temple, Samson's story inspires us to trust God, follow our calling, and live boldly for His glory. May we all carry the lessons of Samson with us, remembering that our greatest strength comes not from ourselves, but from God, and that with faith, courage, and a humble heart, we can face any challenge and achieve the extraordinary. And there you have it, the complete story of Samson, brought to life in animation, full of adventure, faith, and the unstoppable power of God. Let's keep sharing these stories, these lessons, and this joy, reminding everyone that God's plan is always greater than any obstacle we face, and His love and power are always with us, guiding us to fulfill our destiny.